My name is Honig. I am the lead organizer of the Watch City Steampunk Festival held in Waltham, Massachusetts in May, hopefully again in next May. And you can find out more about us at watchcityfestival.com.
Hi, I'm Heather Rockwood. I am the founder and festival director of Jewelry City Steampunk Festival. We'll be in our 4th year. This year we are the Steampunks of New England presents the virtual Jewelry City Steampunk Festival. It's going to be on November 20th through 22nd. You can find more information by visiting jewelrycitysteampunk.com or visiting us on Facebook, Twitter, and on Instagram. Our handles are Jewelry City Steampunk or JC Steampunk on Twitter.
And Steampunks of New England is kind of this umbrella group that originally came about because several of us were banding together to share one booth at the Boston Fan Expo to promote all of our various steampunk events. So it's our 2 events and a variety of other of the local New England events. But Heather and I are here with this discussion about steampunk heroines and tropes of steampunk literature. But we didn't want to assume that everybody who's here necessarily really knows what steampunk is, so we're going to start with our brief Steampunk 101. My usual short version of it is, it's what did the Victorians think the future was going to look like? And what if that's the future that happened? And that we lived in the world that H.G. Wells and Jules Verne and others wrote about, where, fantastic airships and submarines and sky pirate adventures, and mashing up the real Victorian history with what they thought the future would look like with science fiction and adding in more modern attitudes, shall we say. And Heather, do you want to give your 2 cents?
Yep, I usually say it's retrofuturism, just like Melissa. What would the Victorians think futuristic technology would look like using steam? And that's because there are other punks like Diesel Punk, like Mad Max, and we like to differentiate from that just because we like to stay kind of in the Victorian mindset, although some people go all the way from, the 1830s all the way up to the 1940s, but you do start to spread into diesel punk at that point. So I like to just separate it out a little bit. Yeah.
It kind of hits on the Industrial Revolution era, where there's suddenly a huge amount of societal change as societies go from kind of a more rural approach to suddenly factories and city living and trains everywhere.
Trains, yeah.
And but also kind of that spirit of exploration and scientific development, and now we just throw in a few robots and ray guns and have a little more fun with it.
Yes. And, at its core, steampunk is science fiction and fantasy, so things tend not to be true to fact. And I made a short list of things that when you're reading about steampunk or steampunk literature, things like the tech and engineering are going to be fantastical. There might be magic or fantastic creatures. The way logic or the world functions and the world itself may not be on Earth. And cultures and races might be based in our reality, but varies widely in interpretation. And I have a couple of quotes from people who are very knowledgeable about steampunk that I'd like to share with us so we can get kind of in the right mindset. Steampunk is largely motivated by reclaiming or rewriting history. That's by Ashley Strickland in a blog she wrote for geekoutblogs.cnn.com in 2011. In many steampunk works, history is rewritten in a very positive way with women and other people who suffered under imperialism, given roles and powers beyond their historical station. It's a way of reclaiming history and rewriting the roots of our modern world. And that was by Scott Westerfield, who wrote Leviathan. And my favorite, because it's about penny dreadfuls of the 19th century. If you don't know what those were, they were really cheap books that were thrilling. They had very very easy stories, very quickly written. And so this is about how the women in Penny Dreadfuls were either good or bad, and this was going against the Penny Dreadful woman. All steampunk heroines are the new woman in the 19th century, or everything that was daring and revolutionary, everything that was challenging to the norms of female behavior. And that was in a thesis, Clockwork Heroines, Female Characters in Steampunk Literature by Cassie N. Bergman. And now do we want to start with the tropes?
Sure, we've kind of come up with a list of tropes, but I want to take a moment and say tropes are not a bad thing. It's not the same thing as a cliche. It's just kind of a recognizable archetype or plot line, and it's not a bad thing at all. It's all about how you execute it. And of course, if you're into tropes, you probably know the website tvtropes.org. Just be warned, that's definitely a time sink if you let yourself start reading that website. But kind of one of the things we're starting off is what we've dubbed the action hero or heroine slash the self-rescuing princess. You know, where in a kind of a typical, you know, historical Victorian era, you know, ladies would of course be, sorry, my phone's ringing, would be a, you know, very proper lady, or maybe she was lower class, but, you know, knowing her place. There would be, sorry, I'm being distracted. So, but very much in her place. Ladies are in the domestic sphere. They're in the home. And so a lot of things we get is the action hero, the bold explorer, the lady of adventure, who is now going out, leaving the home. She's going exploring. She's maybe, you know, in the jungle and in, you know, other exotic locales. And, you know, there's a real sense of adventure and a discovery, you know, in the real Victorian era, and kind of starting to see ladies taking their part in that sort of adventure. And very much of the attitude of, you know, let's go out, let's find things, let's explore. And certainly the steampunks in their own play definitely like to run with that. And we'd had a couple of examples, and one that I like that, Heather, you put this in, Jane from George of the Jungle. Or even Jane from Tarzan, you know, being a little bit of that woman who is, you know, she's out exploring and maybe, you know, getting a little tangled up in things, but not passive, you know. Heather, do you have something you want to add in here? You added also Lyra from
Yes.
His Dark Materials.
Yes, I just finished that series through audiobooks, and Lyra Belacqua from His Dark Materials is definitely an adventurer. She's really bold. She never really grew up with a family. She has nothing to rail against except for, you know, I don't want to ruin anything for anybody, but, you know, certain things in her past are not what they seem, so she has a mystery. But she is definitely a self-rescuing princess, because she was, you know, beloved where she started out with, and then she went to another group where she was beloved, and then she was rescuing other people, and then she gets into mischief and she rescues herself, and it's just a whole bunch of stories about self-rescuing princess. So I really love her in this trope. I feel like she fits it very perfectly.
Mm-hmm. So another favorite thing that we steampunks like is we love our sky pirates.
Yes.
Sailing in on your airship with your goggles, actually protecting your eyes, not just sitting on your hat like we tend to leave them that way. You know, and of course you've got your very practical clothing on because you're up, you know, flying through the air. Actually, a character that I've added that I've very recently watched, something on Netflix, is a anime series called Drifting Dragons. It's kind of follows right on the border steampunk to diesel, but it is very much a, instead of sky pirates, they are basically sky whalers hunting dragons.
Sounds so cool.
And yeah, I enjoy the series. It is very much about hunting, and gosh, dragons sure are delicious to eat. So if you're maybe on the vegetarian side of things, maybe you don't want to watch that one. But the lead main character is a young woman named Takita, who is kind of the young, inexperienced crew member. So she's learning as she goes, and sort of having adventures. And but I love the aesthetic of, you know, the airships sailing along. And Heather, I'll toss over to you, because this is not somebody I had familiar with. Lily Stargazer of Chasing the Star Garden.
Yeah, it was a book I read a few years ago, and she is actually not a sky pirate, but she is a dirigible captain that races. And it's very much a love story, and she's like this romantic Italian woman. She has some mystery in her past, and it's just a lovely story. And of course, I've been reading most books by audiobooks for a few years, and I just really fell in love with the character. But something that came out recently that I thought, so Lily is very much in the trope of sky pirate. One that I think breaks this trope is Vignette Stonemoss from Carnival Row, which was a TV show. It's not exactly steampunk, but it has the feel of steampunk very much throughout the whole series, and especially with the fairies like Vignette Stonemoss, because she can fly. They go on airships. They have these really interesting adventures, but she's not quite a sky pirate. She's rescuing people, but she's not really like that adventurer. She much more wants to, she's much more about survivalism. So she kind of breaks this trope, even though she fits that model of sky pirate.
Another trope, and I admit this is one of my favorites, I'm a sucker for this, is the secret spy. A woman who uses the fact that women tend to be underestimated or overlooked to sneak about and do their job. And of course, this is very much true. There were female spies during the Civil War on both sides who, you know, people weren't paying attention to what the ladies were up to, and they were taking notes. From you know, literature and television, of course, one of the very popular characters is Lady Mechanica, which is a comic book series we highly recommend, and that she is a at least partially mechanical woman who's trying to understand how exactly all that happened. It's one of the ongoing mysteries, but is otherwise extremely competent fighter, and goes on adventures around the world, and it's a very steampunk world with airships and all the rest. Another figure that I really enjoyed around 2000, I think, this was a TV series that ran on the Sci-Fi Channel that was a little bit steampunk before steampunk really started to hit its peak, called The Secret Adventures of Jules Verne. It is, the basic premise is that Jules Verne actually really went on adventures that went into his stories. And there's a woman there, Rebecca Fogg. She is the sister of Phileas Fogg, flying about on their airship, and she works for the British Secret Service, and always very cool and competent. And of course, she has the gadgets. Your spies always need gadgets, and one of my favorites is she's got a hoop skirt, and oh no, now she needs to climb a wall. So she takes off her skirt. She of course has pants underneath, and the rungs of the hoop skirt turn out to be a ladder that is rolled around, and she takes her harpoon gun and shoots the ladder and climbs the wall. And I just loved that, not just that she had the gadgets, but that she that it was an aspect of her femininity, that it's all hidden under the skirt. And then under the skirt is all the stuff that she needs. Of course, there's the Parasol Protectorate series, which is an intersection of steampunk and supernatural sorts of, you know, vampires and werewolves sort of thing. Heather, I should let you have a moment in here if you've got somebody you want to throw in.
Well, I actually really love the Parasol Protectorate series. I haven't read her other series of books, but I do own them, so I will read them. But I really love Alexia Terabati and her parasols that always have different weapons inside them. So she definitely has that secret spy gadget thing. And I know in the second or third one, she actually has somebody who makes them all for her, and she has like a specialized shop going on where somebody makes all her gadgets for her. So I think that is just super great as like a super spy. But she's
Mhm.
all very much on the side of good. So it's very interesting to read her books.
And
From
I'm being mindful of the time. I think we should move on, Heather, to what you were going to present.
okay. The next kind of trope of steampunk heroines are women on a mission. So it's women that had something happen in their past, or they see something in their future, or they have like this family that they need to prove themselves against, and so that's kind of the overarching idea. And there's three different sides to this, and I really love that they also fall into that idea of the maiden mother crone, of like this three sides of the different kinds of personalities. We're going to start with the crone, or the determined widow. Usually has a tragic backstory. She has some kind of mystery that she has to solve. Sometimes she loves corsets and tea, but not always, because one of my favorite ones is, of course, Briar Wilkes from Sherry Priest's Bone Shaker. And she definitely is a woman that was married, and she was definitely fitting into the ideas of 19th century womanhood, of being the mother, being a married woman, and her husband disrupts Seattle with the machine called the Bone Shaker, and it creates kind of this horrific disruption in Seattle. And her son, and it kills her husband. And so her son goes to prove his father's innocence, and she has to chase after him. So she removes her skirts, she puts on pants, she bribes an airship captain to bring her into the disrupted part of Seattle. And so she definitely is like a woman on a mission. um, the proper lady, the mother, corsets and tea, parasols and carriages. She falls a little bit more into the idea of the ideal woman in the 19th century. And again, women that fall under this trope: Alexia Terabati from Heartless and Soulless and the Parasol Protectorate, because she definitely has this like very proper attitude. Her ankles are always covered. Her neckline is always pristine, even when she's fighting werewolves. Um, and then the maiden is the spirited young lady. Again, sometimes there's a mystery, sometimes she's proving herself. She has a family that she might rail against. And I'm going to bring up again Lyra Belacqua, because she definitely has to prove herself. She definitely has something to prove. She has a mystery to solve with her uncle and how he won't take her on adventures. And I like to bring up Hester Shaw, even though it feels like she doesn't really fit this because she has so much rage within her, and that's why she's really fighting something. Hester Shaw from Mortal Engines, which is a movie that came out 2 years ago. But she definitely has some kind of mystery to solve, because what she thinks happened didn't actually happen the way they did. So I like to bring her up as someone who falls into this trope. But Melissa, you have somebody that falls into this maiden spirited young lady trope.
Yeah, or it looks to be, although I don't know how steampunk it is going to be, but if you have not seen the trailer for a new Netflix movie called Enola Holmes, which appears to be that Sherlock and Mycroft Holmes have a much younger sister who has been raised very independently, raised with the same, you need to be observant, you need to fight for yourself, that her brothers were. But at least based on the trailer, it looks like that her brothers are like, no, 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 we need to turn you into a proper lady. And there's a scene in the trailer where this very tomboyish young woman who has no desire to be a proper lady needs to go in disguise. And what does she do? She puts on the corset and the fancy ruffly dress and becomes the lady. And again, that hiding, in the guise of the very proper young lady so that she doesn't get noticed and avoids her brothers. So I don't know how steampunk that's going to be, or if it's straight up just kind of Sherlock Holmes Victorian, but I'm definitely looking forward to that.
Yeah, me too. It looks super great.
And Millie Bobby Brown is playing Enola Holmes.
She's fantastic. And I had two heroines that really break this trope of like the mystery, having to rail against your family, with Sophie from Howl's Moving Castle, which is definitely a steampunk anime. And, she doesn't really have a mystery to solve. She knows what happened to her. She just is trying to break her curse. She's not railing against her family. She's not railing even against Howl, who she goes to live with. Even the Witch of the Waste, she hates her, but in the end they become friends. So it's, she kind of breaks this trope, even though she kind of fits that spirited young lady, because she definitely has that attitude. And if you haven't seen it, Korra from Legend of Korra, part of the Avatar, the Last Airbender series, the second kind of series of that show. And, she does feel like she has to prove herself as the avatar to the entire world, but she spends the entire time doing it and never actually proves herself to herself. And so that's why I think that she breaks this trope, because she never actually achieves what she feels like she has to. And I think that's actually really great as a trope breaker of like, I feel this so strongly, but I never actually resolve it. And that kind of breaks the trope where like you feel like you have to prove yourself and you do. So that's kind of how I feel about her. Do you want to move on, Melissa?
Sure. So another category that we had were the mad geniuses. Ha 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 ha. Yes, the mad science. Of course, the gadgeteer genius with the clockworks, the engine, leather aprons, goggles, and many, many, many pockets. Of course, the lead on that is Agatha Clay from the Girl Genius comic series. This is a web comic. It is free to read online, or you can buy collected items and books. And Agatha has the spark, the genius that allows her to just create the most magnificent, strange, weird, insane, mad scientist machines. And I love the art style. It's Phil and Kaya Folio. So it's very comedic, but also can be very serious. And it's just wonderful, and it's absolutely full of little clockwork critters and all the crazy, insane machines that she and the other mad scientists of that world create. Heather, you had someone who breaks that.
Yes, from Legend of Korra, Suyin Beifong. She's the one who, towards the end of the series, she has created a whole city that encloses itself in these huge metal contraptions overnight. And, she doesn't work with clockwork. She doesn't work with engines. She's not wearing the leather apron or goggles that really goes with this trope. So she definitely like breaks this trope, even though she's like a mad genius of like mechanics.
Mm-hmm. You've kind of got the next ideas that what we've dubbed the wrench wench. This is the engineer, a little bit less than quite the mad scientist, gadgeteer genius, but she's gonna have usually coveralls and bandanas, engineer's cap, and lots of she's the one working on the big machinery. And someone we fell into this is Winry Rockbell from Full Metal Alchemist, who is that's an anime series, and she assists characters in that series who there's someone who's, long story, why someone is wearing a very large metal suit that occasionally needs work, and also it is a kind of a steampunk-esque world, and Winry is a very competent engineer in that world.
And
Heather.
And again, from Legend of Korra, Asami Sato, who I'm going to forget the name of her company, but she runs a whole company that creates cars and winged devices, and she's basically a mad genius of gears and machinery and tech. So I think she falls right into this trope. the wrench wench, because she just fixes everything.
And then we'll go for, of course, the classic mad scientist, Frankenstein style in the lab with bubbling beakers and tubes and many colored liquids, wearing her white lab coat. But steampunk, makes it a little bit kind of large machines, lots of gears. You need the big switch to bring things to life. And I actually watched something very recently on Netflix called April and the Extraordinary World, very steampunk style. And April is a chemist, and she's pursuing the serum. The serum, what does the serum do? It's a serum of invulnerability, if they can make it work. But it's a very steampunk alternate universe with lots and lots of scientist characters. But seriously, she's right down to having a lab coat and beakers full of stuff. And I really enjoyed that movie. And I'm not familiar with this other one but Heather, you had a villain went with this.
Yes, there is before I continue, we are going to stop in a few minutes. So if you have any questions, definitely write them in the chat now so that we can get to them after we're done talking. Villains that fall into this trope. I love this character. She's Victoria Van Gale from Hilda. Hilda is a comic book turned into a TV series. I think you can find it on Netflix. We love the series in my house. It's a kids one that they use a lot of like Swedish fairy tale, folktale influences. It's beautiful and it's interesting, and you keep looking around going, what new fantastical creature are they going to have next? But Victoria Van Gale is a weather scientist, and she studies the weather, and so the main character, Hilda, listens to the weather reports every day, and she just loves her. She's like a super fangirl of this woman, and they go to visit her because there's this crazy weather that starts to happen in their town, and she has created a situation that Hilda has to rescue Victoria Van Gale from, and you find out that she is not a heroine, she is a villain. So I won't ruin it for anybody, but it's a really sweet TV show, and I definitely highly recommend it. And the next tropes that we're going into is the bad person. So, the evil Luddites, they love plots. They have fake personas with the real persona revealed at the end, many different types of costumes. They might be an eldritch abomination. And one that we really love is the conformity enforcer. She tries to force the heroine to be a proper lady, tells her to know her place since she's a lower class woman. Villains that fall into this trope, the Witch of the Waste from Howl's Moving Castle. She definitely tells Sophie to know her place. She sets a curse on her. And then when they go to see the, Empress or Queen, she tells her again, like, you need to help me, you're lower class than me, like, how could you leave me behind? That's not proper, know your place. So she definitely falls into this. And another one that I really love is Marissa Coulter from His Dark Materials. She definitely tries to put everybody in their proper place throughout the series. And of course, everyone's proper place is within her control. So she definitely fits this conformity and for bad person persona trope. To end, I was going to read a couple of quotes by Sherry Priest, who wrote Bone Shaker. They're a little bit long, but it should only take a minute. The great thing about steampunk, I think, is the thing that really gives it legs is no matter who you are, no matter your orientation, your ethnicity, your gender, whatever your tribe, you were there. We were all there, but we don't always get talked about. And steampunk is a very nice way of reclaiming that, because whoever you were, whatever unpopular religion or orientation or whatever you were back then, it's worth talking about. And maybe even more importantly, at least kind of for now, it's worth playing with. It's worth reappropriating and taking that back. And steampunk is a really fun way to do that. And she said that in an interview with Geek and Sundry. And then she also said, steampunk offers a voice to those who are marginalized, allowing them to stand up and say, I was here, and I absolutely, defiantly reject the implication that I wasn't. It's open to everyone, including those whose historical representation got left out, written out, or killed out of hand. And she said that in a book called Steampunk.
Awesome. Oh, I'm very excited you mentioned Cora. So,
Of course.
So we have a comment and a couple of questions. A comment from the audience: the Drifting Dragons manga includes dragon recipes.
Mm-hmm. The show also makes a big deal out of, here's how we're preparing the meat of the delicious dragon.
Okay.
And the first of the questions, because I had a question too, so I'm going to ask my question too. But I think I'm going to get this right, and if not, they can write something to the host and I can ask the question a different way. But it sounds like they're asking if The Strange Case of the Alchemist's Daughter by Theodora Gloss is considered steampunk, and if so, what do you think it brings to looking at Victorian fantastic literature?
It's in my to-be-read pile, sorry.
Yeah, I haven't read that one yet. I'm so sorry.
I haven't. I think that's... no, I'm not going to speculate what I remember about reading from the back cover. My apologies. I haven't read that one yet. But if someone has read it and wants to type in a comment, feel free.
And so my question is putting everything aside, you yourself, what is your favorite of the steampunk tropes, and what is the one that you wish would just go away?
I do love me some mad scientists and secret spies.
I think of the ones that I wish would go away. I think I'd have to say probably the Determined Widow. Even though they can make for interesting characters, I just think that basing an entire character story around the fact that she was married and now she's not doesn't really define her as a character, and that's the one that I think that especially defining a woman's life around a man is not necessary. And so that's one that I don't like as much. One of my favorites is the one that I said for Hilda, but I'm spacing on it right now. The villains, the villain was the mad scientist. I wish people would use that more. They're kind of stationary. They don't go on adventures as much. So that's a little bit harder to write about because people want adventures. But I wish people would do more with people who create stuff out of alchemy. And I mean, you know, they did that with the Full Metal Alchemist, but we need stronger women characters as lead characters.
And again, it's all about how you execute it. You know, you can take a trope that maybe we're sick of, but if you can come up with a new spin on it, makes us go, oh, okay. Now I'm interested. You know, I'm to give anything a try.
Totally. And those are the questions that we had. So I think that we're getting ready to end. If you guys have any last minute things you want to mention or say, you know, it's up to you. But wait, we got last minute question.
Yes, please, questions.
Question, is there something in steampunk you would like to become a trope that hasn't really taken off yet? That's a good question.
That is a good question. Of course, if I pick anything, hopefully somebody will have an example. Oh, they did this over here. Things I'm starting to see and I'm happy to have more of is non-Western steampunk. Actually, just started reading, and unfortunately haven't finished in time for this particular conversation, a book called Everfair by Nisi Shawl, which is a steampunk novel about the Congo, and which in the actual history of the Congo and what the Belgian colonial government did to the Congo is pretty horrific. But she's doing what we've been talking about, taking the actual history and reclaiming it and retelling it. And so it is, as I understand, a story of the Congo in a more steampunk world where they had more resources to fight back.
Awesome.
I wish that they would bring back jetpacks as a thing, because it was definitely a thing in the 40s through the 60s. And then people were like, that's not feasible in the 80s and 90s. They had more realism, I guess, but this is a fantastical world. And if you want them to work, they will work. So I wish that people wrote about jetpack pirates more.
I mean, everyone
Pirates.
loves a
I
good
love it.
jetpack.
Yeah.
Do science.
Science. I think every era, whatever it thinks its future, what the future is going to be, always reflects the era that it comes from. You know, if you look at like mid 20th century, what is the future going to look like? We're all going to be wearing silver jumpsuits and bubble helmets, you know, and the Victorians thought we were all going to be in, you know, in flying airships. And, you know, whatever we think the future is right now may somewhat resemble that, but probably not accurately. Certainly, hopefully not Mad Max. I don't particularly want that version of the future. But, you know, so you're never right, but it's always interesting to look back at things like, oh, in the future there'll be so much technology to help housewives keep the house clean. It's like, yeah, okay, but you totally missed, you know, the actual developments that are going to happen. So we don't really know what the future is going to look like, but we're having fun. So
Yeah. So we have more questions that came in while we were talking about this. Reading recommendations. Someone's asking for reading recommendations. There's a lot.
Sherry Priest Bone Shaker. There's a whole the whole series is called Clockwork Century, and they're connected books, but they're independent. They like cross over, like a minor character from one book may show up in another one, but you can kind of read them independently. But yeah, they're a very good series. The Leviathan series, Scott Westerhouse. Am I saying that right?
I think I quoted
on
him.
comics, definitely girl genius, absolutely girl genius.
Love Girl Genius. So good. Also recommend the card game that came out. It's really good.
I really like Lady Mechanica. She's one of my favorite comic book series that's out. I really love the art style. It's simplistic and beautiful and very stylized and steampunk, and her story is really interesting. So that's the one that I would recommend. I'm much more into comics, but I listen to audiobooks mostly right now. So even though I have the second series from Gail Carriger, I'm probably not going to read them for a few years. I might download them on audiobook right now.
So we have another comment. The anime Princess Principal is also a good example of the steampunk spy genre. Have either of you seen that?
No, I've not heard of that. Princess. I'm writing it down. Princess Principal?
Yes.
Okay.
I can send you the spelling if you want to. And then the other question we have is, have either of you read The Inventor's Secret Trilogy by Andrea Creamer? If so, would you consider it a steampunk series?
The Inventor's Secret?
The Inventor's Secret Trilogy.
I have not, but I will.
I mean, what is or is not steampunk is definitely one of those things that you ask a group of steampunks and you'll get different answers. It's a little bit, you know it when you see it. I think I'm definitely looking for both that Victorian / industrial era technology, but also, to me, there needs to be a little bit of the fetishization of the technology itself. The gears have to play a role somehow, or you know, you need the airships and the submarines and the giant ground digging earth machines with a screw on the front. You know, there's got to be something about the technology in particular that is part of this world.
I mean, for example, like in Mortal Engines, it's all about how the cities move around on huge, gigantic vehicles. And so it wasn't particularly about those vehicles, but that was a big part of the world, and they had to escape them, and they had to find them, and they had to move within them. Grounding them to a halt. Like, it was a big part of the story to have these things as vehicles. It wasn't just like, oh, and we live on this vehicle anyway, here's our story. It was definitely a part of it.
Okay, we keep getting more questions. Do you have any thoughts on the Parasol Protectorate?
Love it. It's actually one of my favorite series that I've read of steampunk novels. It's one that, like, usually I'll read a steampunk novel, the first one, and I'll be like, and I probably won't read the second or third. Like Bone Shaker I liked, but I didn't want to follow the characters afterwards because it just wasn't my kind of world. But once I read Gail Carriger, I read all those volumes of the Parasol Protectorate within like 3 months. I just downed them because I love them so much. They, some of my favorite books are by Jane Austen, so it definitely has that feel to it, while also throwing in the sci-fi and fantasy that I just adore.
I tend to think of steampunk as being like one of those Venn diagrams with all the circles, and so steampunk overlaps with science fiction, overlaps with actual Victorian history, and in the case of Parasol Protectorate series, it overlaps with paranormal stories, and goth and circus and burlesque and vaudeville, and all these little overlapping things can all go into the mix.
With one of the most realistic vampire characters ever written.
And with that, that was our last question, and it's just about time. So I want to thank you both for coming and being a part of this. I am very excited to see what you put on as the Steampunks of New England. I can't remember the full title.
Steampunks of New England presents Jewelry City Steampunk Festival, November 20th through 22nd.
So I'm very excited to see what you guys are putting together for that, and good luck.
We got some fun stuff planned.
We do.